Yeah. I don't know what that meant. So I'm just going live here.
It's kind of scary.
Yeah. So we have a I don't know what that meant. Okay. We have an echo going on. Anyway, thank you, everybody. It's Mari-Lyn Harris of Heart at Work and the podcast series called Creating an Impactful Legacy for Workplaces and Kindness and all the good stuff, good social business. So, anyway, welcome David Smith. He's one of the co authors of the book called Good Guys the Good Guys book, how men can help women in the workplace and be allies. And it's a very interesting book, very well researched. I've read a glimpse of it, but I found it very interesting. And I thought maybe, David, if you could just maybe introduce yourself and how you got started in doing the book or doing your business or whatever it is that you want to share about yourself.
Yeah, certainly. And thanks again, Mari-Lyn, for having us here
Yeah.
today. And so started this work. I'm a sociologist, and I taught at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland for about 8 years. And that's where I met my good friend and colleague and co-author,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Brad Johnson. And Brad's a clinical psychologist by training.
Mm-hmm.
He's done all of his research in the area of mentoring relationships. And I, as a sociologist, have done all my research in the area of gender, work, and family. So looking at the
Okay.
gender perspectives of career and family. And we started, actually, our first project started on this topic related to mentoring and sponsoring relationships in
Mm-hmm.
particular, which led to our first book in 2016, Athena Rising, How Men Can Be Better Out, or how and why men should mentor women in particular, which was really about trying to level the playing field in terms of professional development resources and access to things like mentoring. And because
Mm-hmm.
again, women uh, don't get the same kind of mentoring that men get, and it's certainly not the same kind of quality in terms of
Right.
what they get. And so really our focus there was to engage men in this conversation about how they needed to be mentoring more broadly and across gender, just being one of the dimensions of diversity that we ought to be thinking about. And it's interesting, as we were in the first year when the book Athena Rising was launched in 2016, about a year later, Me Too went widespread around the
Mm-hmm.
globe. And we found ourselves being pulled into broader conversations about allyship and allies, how men could show up as better allies in the workplace, and not just in the narrow area of mentoring and sponsoring, which really tends to really only include a smaller percentage of men out there, but really men at every level.
Right.
And that's if you're a brand new employee all the way to if you're the CEO of a company out there. What are the things we could be doing in two different ways that we look at allyship? One is we would call the easier part of this, and this is the interpersonal, about how do we show up each day in the workplace and being supportive and collaborative in our relationships with women,
Mm-hmm.
and rooting out gender inequities and holding ourselves accountable for doing that just for ourselves, which is
Right.
kind of the easy part of that. The harder part is the public piece and the systemic aspects of allyship, and that, as an ally, you can't just show up and hold yourself accountable when there are things going on around you. You have to call them out, and you have
Right.
to not just call them out, but also work to correct them and to change them. And certainly we can do that at any level of the organization, because we're all familiar with various practices and processes, no matter what your organization is, that as you know how things work, you know where the bias can exist. And as you become a
Right.
better ally and develop an awareness of that, you can begin to correct that and fix it and root it out. And that's what allyship requires, is that we also do the systemic piece, the public piece of this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we set out to do, the research for Good Guys. And much like our first book, Athena Rising, again, Brad and I are both social scientists, behavioral
Yep.
scientists, and we come at this at a very evidence-based perspective, and bringing in
Right.
the latest research to show us what works and what doesn't work. But it's also important for us to have women's voices be front and center as we look at this. And so we interviewed lots of women across industries and professions, many of them at the top of their game out there, and ask them these questions about, what does it look like when men show up as allies, and what do you most appreciate, and what is it you'd like to hear or see more of that men do
Right.
in the workplace? And what would you like these guys to know more about? And so really
Right.
having those stories and the specific actions and strategies that these guys used,
Right.
so that we could share those with a broader audience out there. And then,
Right.
of course, we found it, it's really important to include men in this conversation too, but be very thoughtful about which men we include. And so it wasn't enough to go out and just let men self-promote or self-label their way into the book as allies. So we used the women that we interviewed to ask them, all right, so can you nominate a few of these guys that you consider to be really
Right.
stalwart allies, and we'll interview them because they've been nominated by a woman to say that they're an ally, and we did. And these guys
Yeah.
were really, again, very senior in some cases,
Mhm.
very humble, and some of them didn't even consider themselves really about allyship. They
Right.
consider more about who they were as leaders,
Mm-hmm.
who they were as people, right? Because
Right.
I'm just a good person and it's doing the right thing.
Right.
But it really was a brand around how they perceived allyship. And so that was kind of how we approached this. And we're excited about the book launching here in just a couple weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm so glad to have you guys on. I know Tess sent me a copy and a little, intro into your idea and how you wanted to do the book. So, with a book and helping everybody become an ally in the workplace, what are some of the top things that you saw that are really important for men to do for women, and the other way around? And what are some top ways that women said that they really needed for men to do for them or help them?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the book is just chock full of that,
Yeah.
because again, it's very action oriented. But I would just like to start by reminding, in particular, both men and women, that to be a good ally, one, it's a journey that we're all on, and we're
Mm.
all in different places, and that
Right.
we have different levels of awareness, of understanding, of experience, and we're going to make mistakes along the way, and
Sure.
that's okay. We have one, I think,
Yeah.
as allies, we have to give each other a little bit of grace,
Yeah.
um, not excuses, but a little bit of grace and understanding that when people are trying and have good intentions, that sometimes we'll make mistakes along the way, and that's okay. We'll point them out and we'll correct them. We'll learn from them and we'll move on.
Right.
But this is one of the things that's holding men back, in particular, about being better allies in the workplace, of being more supportive and collaborative with women. There's a bit of a fear factor. There's a bit of a, gosh, what is my role? Who am I to jump into this world of gender equity and
Mhm.
inclusion in the workplace as a
Right.
guy?
Yeah.
How do I do that? Where do I begin? And
Right.
it's really about beginning to develop an awareness. And so we tell guys, you've got to first go out there and self-educate. Just like in many of us have heard, especially as white Americans right now, that
Right.
in this racial awakening we're going through, that, hey, before you go and start talking to your black colleagues out there and peers, why don't you do a little work on your own first and read up and self-educate and make sure you develop some really good questions and a good frame and context before you start asking questions. And so we do the same thing with men about gender equity, that you need
Right.
to go do your homework first.
Right. Right.
And then when you're ready, then you can go check in with your close confidants, your peers, the people that are your closest with, those women that you trust, and find out about their experiences in the workplace, and really begin to understand, because one of the things we find is it's really hard to fix what you can't see. And
Mhm.
one of the challenges men have is, because they haven't experienced many of these inequities in the workplace, they just don't see them. They're just not aware. And so
Right.
that's one area that guys have got to begin to learn to get better. And that's going to take a little courage on their part too,
Right.
to begin to, hey, check in with your female colleagues. If you have an ERG, an employee resource group in your company for women, see if it's okay for you to attend some of their events and learn. Just go in and listen.
Yeah.
Um, and when you go in, and that's another place that, as guys, we have to think about, all right, so if you do get invited into one of these spaces, how do you show up? And this is not the place for you to go in and take over the meeting and become dominant and in charge and go, hey, this is how we're going to fix your problems. Nah, it's not
Yeah.
your place here. That we
Yeah.
need to go in and first listen. And this is one of the things, the skills, interestingly, that women told us about, that for their male allies that they considered to be out there. that they really spend a lot of time listening, and listening not with an intent to fix women or fix a problem, but really to understand and to learn from it, so that they could take that back and apply it in a variety of different settings. So listening with a really important intent there to understand and learn was important for them out there. Women told us over and over and over again, for guys, one of the things they need to do, believe it or not, is gender equity starts at home. And so you can't be an all-in ally in the workplace, sling on your ally cape and go, oh, I'm here to save the day. And then people see you, especially women, see you not doing your fair share and not doing the things that you need to be doing when it comes to being an ally at home. And so we tell guys, hey, if back in the day when we worked from an office, when you're leaving to go, if you're leaving to go do something with the kids or some sort of family obligation, you need to leave loudly. Make sure everybody knows that you're leaving and why you're leaving, because it normalizes the understanding that guys do this too. And there's junior men that this is good for in the workplace, because they're looking around, they have expectations about different kinds of gender roles than maybe some of the older generations of men. And so you need to do this so everybody feels like it's okay to go out there and do it. And the other thing is talk about these things in the workplace. It's okay to talk about family. It's okay to have your family on display, pictures on your desk or whatever the case might be. So again, we can normalize these kinds of things. For guys, that they need to be taking paid sick leave. So when your kid's sick and somebody's got to stay home with them, you got to do your fair share and you got to stay home too. So take your paid sick leave and then make sure people know that you're doing it. Same thing with parental leave. If you have paternity leave or parental leave, take it. And again, make sure that when you have your out of office reply on your email, make sure you have something in there showing so everybody knows that you're doing it, because it normalizes it, not just for junior men, but again, for women in the workplace out there. It's also good for your kids, because we know that for the boys, when they see their dad being a equal, ally at home with the mother, that again, they have a broader gender inclusive perspective of gender roles when they get to the workplace. And the research is pretty clear about that. What happens when they get to the workplace is another story. But then also for daughters, right? When they have dads that are, again, doing their fair share at home, and daughters see that, they're more likely to persist in their careers, reach their career dreams and goals, and to enter into non-traditional professions and industries out there that tend to be more male dominated. So a lot of, again, allyship, we're like, we can do a lot of this in the workplace, but if we don't start to equalize things at home, we're probably never going to make it stick out there. So a lot of great work that needs to happen right there.
As you were sharing about for men to go in and just listen, whether it's a women's group or maybe just listening to their wives or their partners or friends, girlfriends, or whatever, women friends, is that really not to personalize it, because so often, even I find myself, somebody will say something and I was, well, it wasn't me, but I didn't say it was you, so it's sort of learning not to personalize what they're saying. They're just, we're just expressing what we need more of from men, to, like you say, be an ally, be a supportive partner to us, whether it's at home, at work. And I think the key thing is not to take it personal. If they say something to you, just say, oh, okay, make a note of it, but you don't have to personalize it. It's not unless it's about you that in that situation, but generally, I would say just, have to be careful not personalizing things.
Yeah, but it brings up a great point. Brad and I find that, one of the things that many of the male allies that we talk to, the men, one of the great areas of allyship is really about having relationships with not just other men, but with women, where they can give you good constructive feedback, and that you're asking for it, and then when you get it, that you receive it in a way that shows that, one, you appreciate it as because they care enough to give that to you, and they respond in a way that hopefully you're going to encourage them to continue giving you feedback, and that you care. Because again, if you shrug it off and you don't, or you react in a way that shows that you don't appreciate it, you're not going to get it. And this is one of the challenge that guys, again, that awareness factor you're not going to get this unless you're starting to get some feedback. And one of the areas that's really interesting, there's a whole group of guys out there that we talk about it in terms of an allyship gap, that
Right.
guys think they're doing the work,
Yeah.
but they're not. And we find that over and over again in the research. And it's one of these where, because we believe in it, and a lot of men do, they believe in having gender equity in the workplace and at home. Uh,
Hmm.
just because you believe it and you can talk about it doesn't mean that you're actually doing it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And you need that
Totally.
feedback to know, how well am I doing at this, and what can I be doing better, and how much
Right.
more.
Right. Right. It's just like kind of talk about kindness. People would say, well, I'll buy a program, but I'm not going to implement it. And I says, well, what's the point of buying it? Oh, just so we can say we bought a program. Huh? So it's like what you're saying too. You may think that you're doing it or you want to implement it, but you're really not doing it. So that's just another fat lie. So,
Yeah, it's really that performative allyship, and we see the same thing around race, and certainly we've seen a lot of that recently, and both at the company level broadly, where companies are just kind of saying the right things, but they're not really doing anything. They're not changing anything.
yeah,
And it's kind of a CYA factor in some
yeah,
cases. And sometimes, people are like, oh yeah, we have this kind of a women's leadership initiative, or we have this gender program, or we have a women's ERG, and they feel like they can kind of check the block
right.
that they're committing resources, or they're committing to it in some way that is meaningful. But if you're not really making change, have you
Mhm.
really done anything? And we would argue no, that you have to actually show the change. You have to show the action
Yeah,
that's creating the change that you're looking for.
right, right. So, what do you think that more people or companies or individuals can do to help become a better ally?
Yeah, there's a lot going on out there, and it's interesting. The McKinsey and Lean In Women in the Workplace report for this year just came out, and certainly there's a lot I think leaders ought to be reading. I'm still pouring through it right now,
Right,
um, but see a lot of echoing of the same things that we've been hearing in terms of how COVID, in particular, the
right,
pandemic, has exacerbated some of the problems and challenges around gender and race in the workplace for
mm,
women of color in particular. But I think one of the things is that, for leaders, and this goes for a lot of white men in particular, that we have to become more comfortable talking about diversity and inclusion,
mm,
and because I think there's a challenge in especially senior leaders communicating this in a way that is meaningful in the messaging to middle
mm,
managers, who are the people that are out there implementing
right,
policy. They're the ones making it all happen on a day-to-day basis. And
right,
if they don't buy into it, if they don't understand what you're talking about, then you're not going to make change. It's not
right,
going to happen in a
yeah,
significant, meaningful way. And so
hmm,
certainly I think clarity around the messaging, and maybe you're not completely comfortable with it, and that's okay.
yeah,
It's okay to be a little uncomfortable with it as well, and just kind of acknowledge that I'm learning more about this. I'm becoming more comfortable and aware of it. And so here's why it's important.
mm,
And when they talk about it being important, they needed to connect it to themselves personally. And so, why
hmm,
is it important to me? And this is not just for CEOs. I think this is for
right,
every guy out there who wants to be an ally for women. um, Women may look at you kind of with a little like, well, what's going on? Why are you suddenly, doing this? And they should be suspect to some extent. And we find this all the time, that you need to have kind of your personal story, your personal connection to why this is important to you. And
right,
that might be because of, again, somebody who has shared an experience or a story with you in your family, or your peer, your friend network, whatever it is. But why it's important to you personally, and then connect it to the business.
right,
Connect it to why it's important at work for you, whatever your industry profession is out there. Why is this important that we do this work? And and then suddenly people go, oh, aha, wow, it all kind of ties together and it makes sense, right? So
hmm,
now we kind of have the reasoning, the story behind why we're doing the motivation to do the work. And now we can talk about, all right, what are we going to do with it?
right,
One of the things is being kind of very clear and transparent about, once you have your message, about why we're doing it. And making sure that throughout your organization, your teams out there, that you're talking about this, and you're showing, all right, so this is what we're trying to do. This is how we're going to do it. And being very transparent with people and showing them how we're doing. Because,
Right.
you know, sometimes things don't go well, and that's okay. You need
Yeah.
to show the progress. And then, okay, and if it isn't going well, here's what we're going to do to help ourselves maybe make it go better. But I think that transparency within the organization creates trust. And that could be at the team level, it could be at the, you know, at the company level, whatever it is. It creates trust within the group, because they understand what you're doing and they see it, right, in action. And I think employees are looking for that. I think they're looking for that trust of what we're doing, and it's not some little dirty little secret, you know. And often diversity tends to be this hush hush conversation, and it tends to, the other thing is, it tends to be bend up underneath HR. And again, we find that organizations that find ways to operationalize this within the business, whatever it is, the P&L part of your business, if you have it tied into that, it's much more likely to actually affect change, because now you're going to hold managers accountable for it.
Right.
It was interesting seeing how Facebook was in the news the other day about this, how they had taken their chief diversity officer and moved her. Now she reports directly to the CEO and the COO of Facebook.
Right.
And so there's again a direct line of communication, and there's also a direct connection to the business, which is so important. And then they turned around, and this is the last part of this, around accountability. So important to have accountability.
Right.
That now they're holding their VPs and their directors responsible in their performance evaluations for the diversity and inclusion goals. So in their semi-annual performance evaluation, they're going to talk about how they're doing and what they're doing and trying to accomplish those goals out there. So again, finding ways to hold people accountable. Again, there's a sense of, wow, somebody's watching me, somebody cares about it, it's important to the business, and now I've got to actually do something to show it happening, as opposed to being something, oh, that's just an HR issue.
Yeah.
I'm not going to worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe hopefully more people will get your book and help them really dive into it and just see, okay, how can I make it, my workplace, my team better by becoming an ally or a supportive partner in business, and, you know, including all equities, you know, the racism that we're all talking about, and how to improve all our relationships with everybody, top to bottom.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Well, do you have any final words before we end the call, David, that you would like to say about the book or about your work, or about you?
Yeah, so the book will be available. It ships out on October 13th from Harvard Business Review Press. It's available for pre-order today on Amazon. If you want to learn more about the work that Brad and I do with companies and organizations out there, the broad area of work we do, you can find us on Workplace Allies, all together, workplaceallies.com. And there's a lot more information there about the kinds of workshops we do. And we do a lot of micro skill development with teams and organizations throughout every level of the organization out there. And great. I just think it's really important that we get this message out there to engage as many men as possible to, again, understand how they can be more supportive and collaborative in their relationships with women.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe what we could do is do a forum or something around that, and we could bring on some more men and see how they're doing. Do a follow-up.
And there's a lot of men out there doing it. We just need to share the stories and share the best practices.
Yeah.
So everybody else knows it and sees it.
Yeah, showcase to see this is what's possible, and this is what can happen for you. Make it better for everybody all the way around. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for joining me today, David. I so appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy, and anyway, thank you so much. And as always, be kind to each other and more compassionate to each other, especially in these trying times. That's my message. And take care, everybody. And we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.